3, 4 continues to happen. So please, everybody join me in welcoming Nilotpal Majumdar to this session of Doc Commune. I am so happy that he's come. I keep saying this. I think I've mentioned it multiple times in Doc Commune already, but that one time when I went to Dockage, I didn't even go with a project, but the kind of learnings I came back with, they have stayed with me a decade later. I think I went in 2014 or something. And more than the learnings, I think what I brought back were memories of a very warm space, one that really nurtured filmmakers. And you could say that, somewhere when I was conceptualizing Doc Commune, that was really my sort of aspiration. Can I just create a space where people can talk about their projects, without constantly competing with each other or feeling threatened by each other's ideas? Can it just be a space where we can talk about our ideas, given that there is so few opportunities to do that? So I always look at Dockage as being something that I'm very inspired by, that I have learned from. And this is the man who set it up, who created it. Shantida, when I call you Shantida, it is really my privilege and honor that you are here today to talk to everyone. And I know that this is going to be an excellent session, because you are the repository of so much knowledge and wisdom about the documentary. I would really encourage everyone to ask questions, because despite all his achievements, Shantida is a really sweet, humble, and nice person, always open to answering questions and so on. So please use this opportunity to do that. Shantida, if I could begin our session today with asking you to share with us something about how your journey began. You've had an extremely illustrious career, but how did it all begin?
First of all, Aparna, thank you, and good to know. I'm very glad that Doc has played an inspirational role to create Doc Communion. That is really wonderful to know. And thank you again for inviting me. Last year also we spoke about it, but I didn't have much time. But it's really good to really share my time and interact a little bit more the young filmmakers, young storytellers, and that is the area I feel comfortable, and I love to spend time in because of my experience in the film school teaching students. So I've been always inclined to looking downward always. So in a sense that with even it is not only in India and everywhere. I work with younger people. It's easier for me because it's always easier to interact, influence, and kind of inspire, when people are young. When you have less experience, it is easier for teachers to really handle you. That's kind of one advantage. So thank you again, and it's nice meeting you. So Aparna's question is how I have started, right? No, it's a long story. I have been actually before going to film school, I was in creative writing. In fact, in Bangla literary movement, through I was really pertinent. I had an active involvement, but always I thought that I really a kind of literary activism that was going in Kolkata, which is absolutely it's very of high quality, a young filmmaker. And post 70s, it is still in the mid 80s, where all the young filmmakers, the young storytellers are coming, and the creative literature is flourishing like anything. But essentially, it was extremely anti-establishment. And essentially, it was very nauseatic to kind of anything that has been accepted so much. So in this kind of a very you can say it's very people were very, very intolerant and aggressive towards anything other people are doing. That was such an atmosphere in Kolkata. So nevertheless, I was always influenced by some of the films. I'm not mentioning it now. So I thought possibly the kind of writing I'm doing, maybe the cinema would be the best medium to express myself. And I went to FTI and came back, And then definitely I made two films, and it was a horrible, horrendous, terrible film. And I realized that I don't know the actual film language. Although I came from film school, but it was basically film school is a kind of a magic. You staying for some time, and you don't know actually whether you are really developing it, grasping the language, and also being into a space where you are interacting with the best of the minds of the world. Right? You watch films which are actually curated, selected, best of the films, being produced every year. That gives you kind of a sort of a myopia. So, like many others, I was also quite myopic and was just swayed and totally influenced by kind of film technique, stylizations, and all. We never thought of that. How we'll be talking about people? How do I really express my emotions? So these are the conflict. It was there, so I'm coming back in the creative writing and all. But when I 2000, I went to Cinema du Rire, the French festival, which is Popular Center, which is a quite a very good documentary film festival. It is actually totally funded by External Affairs Ministry in the government of France. There I saw Curious Kami, I met some people, and I saw a series of documentary films, which deeply influenced me. Deeply influenced me that I've seen just one lady, going to kind of a 80 years old lady and going to her courtyard in the morning sun is there, and she is really just exercising. She's actually healthy, and she wants to keep her fit. At the same time, she also wants to really dressed up well. So it's a relationship between her and the mirror, in the garden, the way she celebrates sunshine. So all these things, I said, okay, this is the kind of thing that always, uh, at least these kind of moments and situations, I've been really um, trying to express or figure out and interpret, in my writings. So I found suddenly that there is a great relationship between documentary and creative literature. And I am today really, you can say, the absolutely blind propagator of idea of that documentary is actually, it is not the fiction. Documentary is more close to creative literature, particularly the literature that I have experienced in Bengal. And it is not only Bengal; it is now everywhere in all regional languages. So from there, I thought a second thing that I thought that the way documentary filmmakers are pampered and supported and taken care of, which is totally uh, impossible and unbelievable in in our situations, then I was thinking whether this such kind of situation can be seen and it is practicable in our situation in India. So from this year onwards, I was trying to do something, and I did something. It's called Dockyard in some. Um, I had a kind of art gallery, my sort of a kind of craft gallery. There we had a festivals and discussions, and that's how it started in 2000, I think. And I came back. After that, I have been always looking at a situation where now there are two things. It is not about kind of a funding that actually it actually inspired by, but by this time I knew that it for a forum and all this thing that is happening, and it's a community coming together. There are people who are really, it's quite a lot of hand holding, giving inputs, and it's inspirational, motivational, in a sense that a community is together and they're working on their next project. So senior to junior, there's, and coming from representing different culture. So I thought a multicultural platform, if it can be created, where we don't have to go and knock on doors of other people. People will be coming from different parts of the world. And I always believe that these cultural differences will be really a big thing that will help to grow the fold and help filmmakers. And second thing, definitely the most important thing, whether the international community who have been doing so much for documentary, if we can engage them and try to change our situation. That's how it happened. And I never thought that it will be really successful. I tried, when I was in SNFTI, one, second, third year, it was going. Then I thought that it is possible and should continue. And I didn't know, but it happened. After it really took off and it has its natural process. It grew up, but we always try to really improvise it, bring in new kind of changes, to how to, um, particularly the workshop, the incubation part, how best we can give the input. And of course, what Apoda had said, it's not a competitive one. We never say that it's a market, but of course, it's a marketplace also at the same time. But the question is that whether we know what Apurna is doing, what I'm thinking about. So it's a kind of thought process, how an artist looking at it, and what are the tools and mechanisms, and what is the kind of devices he or she is applying to express us. So I learned from Apurna and Apurna learns from me. That was the kind of so it's a kind of a shared experience. We are together, and each and everybody's physical reality, the cultural reality, political reality, are different, emotional reality. But when we come together, we see that how uniquely you are bringing out your own language, and from that process, I learned from you. So these are the kind of a basic philosophy and based on which Dawkins started. I don't know whether we are maintaining it, but it is really, even till today, it is extremely satisfying me and for my team, even for the filmmakers that we come across. That's how it happened.
Thank you, Shantida. Um, in the last many years, you've really been part of the story of many films which have done well internationally, which have got funding internationally, and so on and so forth. But I want to ask you about what you look for when you select projects to
Mm.
dockage. What is, because over the years you must have, I'm sure it's very instinctive by now. You read something and you immediately understand, okay, where can this go? What is this about, right? So share with us some of those learnings.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very mm, not easy to answer actually because there are so many layers. Uh, but one thing from the very beginning, I don't know. Mm, Maybe again I'm saying because I'm coming from really hardcore literary background. So most of the project I was quite cynical about. It's a name for God, something like. Always there's a kind of a negativity was. It was so profound in me. And because there was no kind of there is no professional or academic pedagogic platform where you learn documentary writing. Okay. Writing documentary is basic. Now when the people call it synopsis, so I also didn't know actually properly how to write a synopsis. My film school didn't really let me learn it. Also because of our whole, it's a convergence of fiction talent in the film school. And also there, it is not expected that even a faculty member is equipped enough to help you out. Not everybody, but most of the cases. So in that case, after writing the proposals, and we first of all, it was 2 3 years. It was very difficult. People actually objected to the idea that why I should be sharing my idea because IPR is an issue, and if I publicly talk about my idea, it will be stolen. So it was difficult for me to convince filmmaker. I said, okay, good that to put it in public. That means you put your signature that the subject is yours, the character is yours. So nobody will dare to really touch it. Initially, it was I also didn't understand that what kind of films that we should select because application was less. The people are skeptical. Okay, those are the initial hiccups. You forget that. Once down the line, 5 6 years, we understood that filmmakers also slowly gradually got into the process, and many of them are also looking at the kind of other institutional website, their resources, and you get a template, We never really given a template, I personally believe that each and every template, it's okay. There's definitely generally a number of words, then what to really highlight, at least chronological 3, 4, 5 points, But we always wanted to, at that time, most of the cases, the Indian documentary, now the world talks about inclusion. Now the world talks about diversity. Possibly it is the legacy of IPTA, and post IPTA. Most of the Indian documentaries always, anything that happened, it always a kind of it was championing the kind of voice of marginalized society. What is happening there in the village of Uttar Pradesh? What is happening in Bihar? Why is the political violence is happening? How the kind of the elites are being ill-treated. There are so many things that are happening. So basically, Indian documentary was little event-driven, not always, often, and always representing a kind of really, really marginalized individuals, a community. Most of the cases, So, and so many kind of things that is happening, political events, and going again also establishment, also one of the spirits of Indian documentary. So we used to get quite a lot of that. Um, you can see the issues that is possibly um, more widely handled by mainstream media, both televisions and print media. Um, so I was sure about that this kind of subject, if you make a film out of that, telling stories may be uh, something that it will confine to kind of somehow it will be driven by the issue rather than kind of sort of a more deeper emotional journey or getting kind of access to the kind of layered complexities, So this is how then basically what we are looking at, started looking at the kind of, okay, what the story is all about. The story is all about it is something, and how the story is being presented. We initially didn't find the good trailer, because trailer is the key everywhere, because text is being written once. For my understanding, I read the text to get to gauge your kind of story that you are trying to tell, and after that it is the kind of a visual clip trailer. If you click call it trailer, treasure clip, whatever, but that actually gives you the idea about you, control over kind of your kind of technique that you are trying to employ, the language that you'll be using, and second thing, your access to characters, whether it will be easy for you or difficult for you, and how precisely you can get into the core of the subject. So based on that, we started really, um, we started identifying films, and uh, many of the times the extremely well written and well discoursed subject was also not selected, because you can make out that issue and subject you are talking about, it is well articulated, but as soon as you go into the pitch clip, the trailer, your visuals, how you are looking at it, how you are positioning it, that also is to look at. So mm, eventually, now definitely that it is that what we really look at. mm, Now the subjects are coming, it's very diverse. And each and every subject and segment is different. And filmmakers positioning and their artistic acumen, how they're looking at it. You don't have to be perfect, because you don't have to relate something with Gaga, that is absolutely convinced, no, because we know you are coming to an incubation forum. So at least 12 teachers will be working with you, and you get quite diverse input, that you have to filter in. So we'll go through a kind of process. It's a peer dialogue and discussions, and after that, definitely we'll find what you want to do. You will find the thread, your story, and with the kind of style that you'll be employing. So it's the kind of where the soul is vibrating in yours. So we identify something that come out from your inside, how you are really engaged with your subject, and when you write about it, when you shoot some of the shots going into your story space, definitely one can understand that how much you are engaged with it, how how mindful you are, and how your soul is vibrating. That's the one thing, and it is very intangible thing. It doesn't have a kind of a very strict kind of a what you can see that kind of a understanding to identify project. At the same time, when you really look at the diverse project, at least you have to select 24 projects. So definitely you need to look at second stage the diversity in terms of subject and ideas and content, because eventually you are presenting a project to the international community. An international community with okay, they are the one who care for documentaries, but at the same time we have to little because we need to seduce them, we need to attract them, we have to really push them to really to invest on projects and be one of the collaborators. And for this, definitely um, that kind of variety and diversity and uniqueness in the entire package has to be there. But it doesn't mean that we leave. Sometimes we go for 22 projects. We don't select 12 projects, right, but 24. Sometimes even we go for 26 also, because we know that there are some very good projects we cannot really miss out. So opportunity, we are creating the opportunity for filmmakers. So suppose there are 10 very good projects, I need to support with this 10 project, um, 10 ideas by curating even some very interesting project, so that the entire experience become quite magical and influential to me. And we have seen that how magical dockage experience as far as the international commissioning editors are concerned. But it doesn't always, translate into kind of immediate. Quite a lot of good projects didn't get funding because funding has its own mandate. It is very fractured and fragmented. That you should know little later, even not now. Yeah, this much. Sorry, I'll be coughing in between.
No. Thank you for coming despite your cough and cold. We couldn't come on Friday because he was very unwell. Shantita, you've actually left at a perfect point. Your answer ended at the perfect point, which is that there are so many good projects. But the unfortunate truth is that many good projects often don't find funding. And that's just the way, I mean, those are sort of demands of the market, which a lot of times, there's very little you can do about that. So how do you counsel filmmakers, when you can see a film, you can see a subject, you can see the passion of the filmmaker, that this is a great film that deserves to be made. Yet you find that, for whatever reason, and nobody is to blame here. Everybody is just sort of trying to, work in an imperfect system. So how do you look at the project, and what do you tell the filmmakers?
And how beautifully I write and compose my regret letter? You're asking me that? No.
No. When the films come to dockage,
Yeah.
and you see the potential in them, and you know that this is probably going to be a very interesting film. And you are also confronted with a situation where perhaps they don't get any funding, and nobody, picks up the project.
Okay.
What do you sort of?
So see, one thing I should really make it clear, although we know that it's an opportunity for filmmakers to really reach out to the international community, and it's a kind of, you can say, the international launching pad, But we actually could defy the so-called global template of market. So that's why most of the cases, why so many commissioners are coming, and spending that time. Only we give them 3 to 4 nights of hospitality. And coming to India and traveling from USA, which is 24 hours, 20 or 30 hours of travel, there's 60 hours of travel back and forth. And they stay for only some 70 hours maximum. And that too, 2 days of pitching and meetings and not exhausted. So yet people love to come because so-called the kind of people go to any market. Of course, you will see that there is a great degree of efficiency in terms of filmmakers' presentations, the greater degree of professionalism, and the way they really speak, because there's quite a lot of funding support is already there. They are possibly shot for more than 100 hours, before pitching. So that is something that is we cannot match in our situation. But in terms of variety, in terms of subject, in terms of very personal film, highly political content, so ours is something that we don't look at the kind of film so-called the people come to shop. So in a marketplace, looking at, okay, these are the kind of commission raters. They love this kind of. We never thought of it. To be very frank, I really personally do not know who loves what. And I don't want to invest my time to really get that wisdom because this wisdom will not help me, very honestly. So it's always a kind of very refreshing and unique experience for the commissioning editors. So sometimes, but at the same time, you cannot be absolutely ignorant about because we know that if these certain stories are too localized, that story cannot really resonate with the kind of work. Somehow it remains a very local story. Now, what happens? I actually propagate that, and everybody knows that I don't tell people that try to universalize your story. There is nothing can be universalized, unless it is local, unless it is native. If it is your voice, if it is your you tell, I accept you as a storyteller because you have a unique experience in the given time and space that you live in. Like I see 4 or 5 faces, like okay, Kashav, I see. Keshav. Now Keshav Madhav, the way he is in his own space, interpersonal relationship, or responses and reactions to the situation that he confronts. So Keshav would be able to. Keshav is coming with a kind of outskirts of Nagpur, for example. So that space, each and every space, emotionally, politically, and geopolitically is something unique, and also your personal experiences that only you can talk about. So I know that Keshav only will be able to talk about it, and I don't expect that Keshav will universalize this too. But yet there are certain situations, like mm, many of the kind of like when you go to indigenous spaces, like stories about tribal issues. Most of the cases you will see that it is really um, driven by our. Basically, we should not be telling the story on tribals. Forget about it. I cannot go to kind of. I have shot some films in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh quite a lot, but I never could dare to really talk about their ways of life. But the iron smelting is one of the craft. I have shot it. But that's okay. So some of the stories, like first of all, certain stories, that you cannot. Uh, very difficult to give a new interpretation. World knows about it because ways of life is eventually very very common, except whatever the cultural differences, whatever the political differences in memories and histories, of a kind of a human space, human landscape. There actually we live quite identically. In our knowledge acquiring system is also quite identical. So certain subject is definitely so difficult to give a new interpretations. And what happens? Watching documentaries particularly or any kind of artwork, particularly the audiovisual artwork, it is basically a kind of a knowledge acquiring system. So what we see that we actually co-produce knowledge. We don't co-produce or produce films. So as I said that Keshav Madhav's personal experience is something when he is sharing with me, he's sharing a kind of very unique knowledge that I don't have. And his experience, I become very extractive. I extract whatever I really experience from him, and his unique experience. I put it together. In knowledge acquiring system, it is always interesting. Interesting in the sense it has to have a point of interest. Like um, the recently that Titanic, what it is called, not submarine.
Submersible.
Uh, so after the implosion, yesterday I got a news that there is some incredible amount of viewing of an animation film. The people want to know how this small submarine actually uh, got deformed and accident took place. Okay, it's a kind of a event, it's a tragedy, naturally people will have, definitely. But all over the world, I think it is because already 15 million or 16 million people and it's going on. People really want to know. So our particularly that documentary viewing, it's very strongly the more of a kind of uh, to get a kind of a to go through an immersive artistic experience, it is actually more knowledge gathering experience. When it is a knowledge gathering experience, you have to handle me, guide me to swim through and sail through the process that you are creating for me. That means it has to be attractive. If it doesn't stimulate me, I don't really get into it. So that is the issue that is happening. The many of the subject you are unable to bring out and churn out the new grains that really further engages. So with filmmakers, when they come and we talk about it, definitely I always get excited when the some of the films. So in fact, yesterday one of the filmmakers came. He was doing a film on LGBT, and it's a fantastic story. Initially, he was a father, but wife, after 6 months of baby's birth, wife realized that sexual orientation is different. Somehow, it's very marginalized North Bengal community, Northwest group, and also there's the economic stress. Finally, mm, wife committed suicide, and then the baby of 1 year old, something like that, has been taken away by the in-laws. And that time, after that, he was crying and blah, and he started doing a folk performance and all. So when you come to kind of a third gender or LGBT community, now we hardly could get into the kind of a larger experience, from their ways of life and other subject. So most of the cases now, after 5 years of so many films on the LGBT community, people want to see something else. They want to know community from a different perspective, more closely. So can you really unwind and uncover, unleash that experience that I want to really get into? That is something that always I was telling him that forget about your fame in LGBT and what is his orientation. It should come from the background. But now it's a father is actually it's a daughter and father relationship. He has been mad. He's going to the in-laws, trying to get the baby back. It's not happening. Then he decided, okay, when he's 5 years old, I'll take her to a school, given her admissions. I said, okay, let it be the kind of main focus of the film. So it's difficult, giving a kind of a right direction to the filmmaker. But even certain films that it's not eventually selected, we talk about it. We give them a kind of a understanding that what is the kind of um, most important aspect of the film, what is the strength of the film, and how we should go about. And I don't believe that each and everybody has to really present the film to a market, because it comes later, that whether you'll get a funding or not. The important question is, do you have the story with you? And it is not important even to get a kind of international film festival. Can you really make a film in Delhi, and show it to 500 people, which makes sense, something like that. Could I really answer you what you wanted to know?
No, no, absolutely. And I think that's a very important point, which is that a lot of times, because there is such a scarcity of funding, our motivation to make the film is so sort of focused on getting the money, that somewhere perhaps we stop thinking about the film and what is that going to do, for my sort of, and what kind of artistic vision do I want to bring to it. Is it a story worth telling? So I mean, we became filmmakers because we wanted to tell stories, and okay, of course, to tell stories sometimes you have to look for money and all that, but that cannot be the focus, right? We have to keep storytelling as our focus at all times.
Absolutely. Yeah, in this case, just I can tell you that you don't need to tell a story. You don't really occupy a kind of a privileged position of a storyteller. And what is the Indian population? I don't know. I forgot. And that's each and everybody is telling their own story in their own ways. But we believe that we are the storytellers. We can tell story very uniquely. Um, if you are not in a position to tell the story, uh, which will somehow um, reach out to the people, then you cannot be a storyteller. No, that's you can tell a story for yourself, for a small community. It's fine, but don't assume responsibility of a storyteller that you have to. There's actually no need. Unless otherwise something special is coming out.
Mhm.
So funding is definitely much later it comes. When uh, see, it's a kind of a very complex thing, in a sense that without adequate support, you cannot tell your story. At the same time, you have to look at yourself whether do you have a story?
Mhm.
Is it with you? How much you go into it? Because there's incredibly great young storytellers all over the world, particularly in documentary. They're just unbelievable. One film you watch and get stuck by thunderstorm. It's 4 or 5 days you get into a kind of a different world. Such strong stories are coming out. So it's extremely competitive. So real competition is coming in the creative strength, your sensibilities, the way you look at things, your unique point of view. That is something that people look at. So when you come to these situations, there's hardly any, and there is so much of mechanism for supporting filmmakers. So much of the great ecosystem globally that is available. Look, Sundance is giving 50,000 after COVID, from 25 to 50,000. They've increased their support. Next year, for development, they'll be giving 50,000, and production, they'll be giving 100,000 USD. So people are realizing how important storytelling is. Why? They don't want to support you. That's why they are really extending their mandate, and they are becoming more kind of extremely, you can say, the kind of engaged with their kind of driven by their kind of vision of supporting storyteller. Why they're doing it so? Not to really support me or Aparna or Harsh. No, they believe that the filmmakers, the storytellers, as I said, creating incredible product, incredible content, that helps us to understand society beyond my borders, cultures beyond my borders. geopolitics beyond my understanding. So, as I said, that it is a kind of a fantastic knowledge system, out of the network. Great things are coming out that will definitely change the perception, understanding, belief, of civilizations. And we are possibly the kind of, you can say, the kind of an activist and member of this army, one among them. So they want to support it. Now ITFA has increased it. There are new funds are coming from Europe again. American funds are really extending. So in a way to make a film living in India, and possibly one grant will be one Sundance grant will be good enough. You don't have to run around. But are you okay to really mm, strong enough to get that fund? Because as I said, because funders are becoming more and more responsible and demanding. They know that what documentaries are doing all over the world, and they know how the kind of indigenous space, the native space, native people giving, reinterpreting the world around. So, okay, support this. Unless you do this, the other side of the world, the native voice and real voices will never really be tangible. To make it tangible, to make it diverse, make it really strong, that's where founders are coming up. So there's always a support around it. Thing is that you have to really find your story. Not necessarily that you have to find a story that really fulfills the mandate of the grants, but yes, something, And I do not have a kind of a yardstick on which films actually get funds and which films do not. It each and every year it depends on the jury, it depends on people who are deciding. It varies from time to time.
Shantita, if I could ask you, you've worked with so many young filmmakers. Do you now like have a radar where, when you start working with them, you have a sense of, okay, is this person going to finish their film or not? Is this somebody with great ideas but hasn't yet figured out how to execute them? Is there something, can you give us pointers, to sort of understand where we are in our journeys? Is there a way in which one can self-evaluate and see, because everybody thinks that the stories we want to tell are very important, but is there a way in which we can self-evaluate and say, okay, let's really look at ourselves with a very sort of inquisitive eye and see if the story that we're really putting our heart and soul into, is that really the best story? I mean, how would others sort of respond to it? I mean, I'm just wondering if there is something that you are able to grasp from the way in which the filmmakers are talking about their stories, or the way in which they're trying to make their stories. Are there clues there?
Yeah, I personally, I'll say that yes, I understand it very much. I can understand also that uh, somehow this project will not work. And I know that initially there's quite a lot of it's a little unstructured, and so much of fumbles. But I know he or she will make it, because subject is such. At the same time, kind of engagement and inquiry level of inquiry is there, and at the same time, constantly evolving yourself. It's also important that self uh, evolution. When you were, I don't want to give an example because now the filmmakers are quite great and well respected from the day one, the way they've started journey. I don't really want to give a concrete example, but I can say that says Aparna is a kind of imaginary filmmaker. So there are some filmmakers, many of them actually. None of them actually, it was a kind of a cakewalk. So what happens when you come to docket, you get money? It doesn't happen. It's a kind of a first time you're bringing your idea and sharing with people, artists, professionals, who has that experience, understanding, and also kind of a creative acumen. Also, they are also storytellers. So get into a community where quite a lot of experience is there, new people, fresh people who are in a mode of defiance. So altogether, it's a diverse group. So post workshop, what happens? You realize that after, as we said, that you also spoke of your experience, the many layers of discussion that is happening. Okay, this is the first time. It's a kind of, people say that 2 semesters of film school input compressed to kind of in 1 week, because 10 hours you are into a kind of process. It's quite maddening, and extremely intensive. But at the same time, constantly that you start raising questions about yourself, your subject, your sensibilities, your ideas. And also you are listening how other people are creatively treating certain things, and how one is bringing their reality and looking at from unique perspective. Now, from my, I'm listening to Aparna and I'm listening to possibly Sagar, and I started picking up my things. If you cannot call it a plagiarism, it's a kind of open discussions. I see there are two very sharp points which Sagar is talking about, and he looks at his perspective, or the character's perspective, in a very unique way. I said, why not? This could be the clue for me. So constantly you are learning from everyone. Now, after that, it's not easy. Now you have to reprocess it. You have to make it practicable for you. Okay, rationalize this all this input you go through. It's mind-boggling. Then understand your subject, your positions, and what you are trying to talk about. What is your language? All these very primary questions will come, and you start retweaking it. You start applying those experience and elements, into your own subject. So it's a long process, and of course, then, like, I know a filmmaker can offer now. She came first time to Let's Talk, and after the workshop was over, I I I said in my very cynical way that বাংলায় বলেছিলাম হবে না তোর দ্বারা, and then why, and eventually she was very upset, crying. But I understood it. I didn't mind to make people really sometimes see something which is truthful, but at the same time, I take care that it doesn't create an wound. So then a long time, the Aparna spoke to me and said, Dana, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. But I'm definitely not the one to understand everybody's film and give them a kind of a fantastic idea to really, so that they sail through. I reflect upon with my understanding something that then slowly, slowly, and this subject has been changing. She's looking at the character from different angles. Um, she's going into their life and so close, observational, sitting over there, almost living with them. Came up with something so fantastic, page clip. So let's talk. The docket she was selected, and then possibly she got every possible foundation money grant, and so much of grant, that, and with this, then she is also going to see. But docket is a winner. So Shona goes from docket to uh, Sheffield. Shaunak must have told this. From Sheffield, she got the producer. So, in a sense, that this is a kind of a window, platform, where after this, you go to another platform. You meet another set of professionals. So, it's a long journey. And each and every journey starts purifying you and helps you really understand where do you stand in terms of your faith. And every time it really changes your internal perspective vis-a-vis your artistic positioning, and you start rethinking about your subject, your characters, and the situations they go through, and you go through a process of selection and rejection, and that is how um, you go. And there are so many films that, to be very frank, that I was so excited about. At least, so at least 80% of the films, I found that I almost became a kind of a creative ambassador of the film, and I have seen that they're successful. It was not in terms of raising fund, because mm, fundraising definitely it doesn't amuse me. Of course, this is a kind of that's a very basic core that helps you to make the film. But at the end of the day, whether you are making your film, that is to be seen. And 20% cases, it was good. It's little doubt, and it couldn't make it for many reasons. It doesn't mean that there's a kind of a creative lapses, and there's a dearth of kind of in terms of resources or lack of engagement. No, but somehow it didn't work. As I said, that great stories, that you can talk. I can talk about my father, a great story, but I know nobody will pick it up because my discourse with my father will be such. There's nothing new for people to really understand and to look at, And first of all, he is no more, and it will be kind of a quite metaphysical, So many goods, but if I write about my father, I know that 100,000 people will read it. Like I'm writing like all my regrets about my mom, my brother who passed away last year for COVID, and my father, mother, everybody that and who actually shifted my world, my vision, and um, occupying the half of my emotional memories, I know if I write about them, people will read it. But if I want to make a film, maybe in case of my mom, it would be quite good because my mom was from Noakhali during 47 riot, 46 before riot. Not before partition, there was a riot in Pakistan. She had to really live it. Her memories and stories are incredible, absolutely. Almost the history of South Asia, and her also the struggle, post partitions. I know even if I make a kind of even if I speak about it on screen, and people will listen to me because it will have a kind of a fabulous journey through kind of a time and kind of unknown history. So some great ideas cannot be converted into films. Well, now it could be converted into films, but it may not be really supported by funders. It may not really supported by festivals. One of the films I'll not name, it was a kind of a folk artist. It's a great film made by senior filmmakers, got so many national awards. Always I told him this film will not walk in festival circuit. And at the same time, you said that there are few festivals. This is a nice film, very nice film about a folk artist. Was a um, puppeteer in rural Bengal. Father was a puppeteer. He inherited the skill and the craft, and he wanted to promote that craft. And he was a little passionate and crazy about his craft. And there is 4 or 5 people in the village who were supporting. He's actually a daily wage earner as a kind of labor in the construction field, but in the season, in the winter, he goes out to villages to perform. It's really something wonderful, talks about kind of a marginalized individual, but his incredible passion for craft and art, and single-handedly is promoting it. And he is also thinking how to really um, that legacy can be handed over to someone else. It was very well shot and well edited. But festival is totally so blind about this film because again the festival they have a 24 film slot, 30 film slot. They do not want to revisit the discourses that is available everywhere and that wisdom and understanding about certain things, indigenous craft, how they are being stifled, in the kind of wake of modern economy, how the craft person is being challenged, how it is disappearing. This discourse is no more important for them to really put on the kind of a big screen, in the 70s festival. They'll rather talk about something else. They might be talking about how a kind of a family of an immigrant Bihari family, rickshaw puller's family. They're now 20 years old girl, becoming kind of an influence on the community through kind of using the mobile app, something like that, because it talks about a kind of a new way of proving yourself, reaching out, and being totally from nowhere, you started influencing people even within your community. So, what are the trains and tenets of such kind of way? That's what one wants to know. So, to further know, trying to know about bringing the discourse of disappearing art, it's possibly not for all the festivals. Maybe the Museum of Modern Art or the kind of Margaret Way Traveling Festival, they are into ethnology and anthropology. For them, it is definitely a big point of interest.
Thank you, Shantida. And I think it gives a lot of relief. I think, I mean, definitely to me, if Shantida can have subjects that that he thinks cannot be made into films, it's absolutely okay for us also to have subjects that we think cannot be made into films. And I think it's a very pertinent and important point you're making. Not every idea needs to be told in the form of a film. There could be other ways of telling that story. It need not always be film. And I think that's something that one should always sort of keep in mind. I have one more question to ask Shantida before I open it out to the mentees to ask you questions, which is that, there is this a question of the producer, which is really coming from the West, in a sense, from outside of India, where you have a market which is developed enough for there to be a director and a producer who are two separate entities. In India, as you know, it's the poor filmmaker who's trying to do everything from the jhadu in the office to, trying to raise money to, going out for the shoot to everything else, to applying for film funds and so on and so forth. So how have you seen this thing being negotiated? How do you bring a producer on board, especially at the very sort of early stages of a film? When you're going to a market, or even for Dockage, I remember, there was this thing of who's the producer. I don't know if it's still there. But the director and the producer, there was a question about that. So what is your advice, especially when a film is in its early stages and you don't really know whether it's going anywhere? You're really trying to figure out. How would you suggest that one sort of deal with that stipulation?
I want to give this answer a little flavorly, not honestly. Thing is that it is, of course, it is without a producer, it's a kind of a production ecosystem is unbelievable. And but however, we were kind of our kind of filmmaking, documentary filmmaking, has been a kind of what should I say? That's a very, very individualistic activism, and it is something that it comes from the holy idea of I'm an artist, I'm a storyteller. So I'm such a kind of holy position that it is my accountability to tell stories, and money, fun, producer. So it's a passion driven, a kind of a truly incredibly um, honest engagement of an artist, documentary filmmaker. We never actually, our kind of filmmaking actually came out as an answer to the kind of mainstream nonsense, to defy it, And so it was quite ideally driven, okay, and driven by ideals, some kind of a conviction, So we are a different kind of a breed. Now, as we started making films, and some Doordarshan, some PSBT money, PSBT has supported so greatly with the film exhibition money. So this is a kind of a filmmaking that supports little independent filmmaking, not sustainably, but okay for one go, one film, Now, at present context, when you so many challenges, definitely there has to be. First of all, you do not know. The, the conflict is that you need a producer definitely who would be providing you specialized services. So she is the one or he is the one has the knowledge and wisdom and networking and expertise to really how to present, where to go, whom to talk to, and ensure the kind of finding and the entire research base. I have a kind of an idea. Okay, this film I will not go to Aparna. I'll go to Shruti. And Shruti is the person that the kind of subject and film that with the for last 10 years of experience, the profile I'll check. And I'll go to Shruti that whether this film suits you and whether you want to collaborate with me. Now, in Indian context, this problem is that we do not have a producer. Why? Even if you producers, we do not have right kind of producers. Now, like filmmakers, most of our producers, even they're participating, they're not well informed. So you do not have really informed talent and professionals who can really participate with you. Having said that, anticipating this, that okay, Apurna is becoming my producer. To be very frank, knowing that Apurna is not the one that will really take the film to different people, but yet I'll suggest you work with Apurna. At least Apurna will take care of certain part, certain responsibility and accountability. She will shoulder with you and work together, and possibly with your film, Apurna gets further enriched. Maybe from you to third film, Apurna becomes a kind of a full-fledged producer. Now, doing producing is not the kind of investing of money. Okay. Now, producing doesn't mean that I have to. I'm a producer. I'm actually um, giving my all my creative pain, but not a single rupee. I said that even my travel I'll take care of, food I'll take care of, and I'll take care of you. You don't have to pay me anything for the time being. But what I'm doing, I'm giving you kind of a understanding, exposure, handholding you, helping to write, it cut, edit your cut, So all sorts of this is the kind of support that you should get the producer from. Now, eventually, a very few producers we have who are not really informed about the financial world. It's very complex. There's a legal, finance, and signing an agreement is so complex. We don't normally sign the agreement because we are always suspicious about it. And generally, I've seen the community. And another problem is that with the director-producer relationship is that director has so much ownership over the project. Suppose I am working with you for 6 months, and you see that after making profit, I take 20%, or a grant is coming, I I have to charge my professionals. Suppose I charge 10%, You will think, अरे Sundance का तो पैसा मिल ही जाता, अपना विंग में घुस गया, 1 लाख चला गया. So our perception about uh, producers, we have to little change. So it's working together with your partner would be always advisable. And even if you do not have a kind of very well-informed producer, unless our producers are working with our filmmakers, we will be able to create that very professional, foolproof producing community. So this the time has come that we work together, and there could be possible if I can falter, my producer can falter. My producer Aparna could have taken better decisions, but personally dealing with the finished producers, Aparna had taken wrong decisions that I am losing 5,000 euro more. So these are the things that might happen, but try to work with someone who takes certain responsibility and also like you are getting experienced. You now Dr. James, now there is 24 projects and 48 people are participating. Producer is always there with them. Sometimes two producers. So work together with them. And as you grow, more and more important responsibility you can share with your producer. You might not be having a kind of great producer who will be able to support you wholeheartedly in terms of your full understanding of how the global documentary industry is operating. May not be, but it is good to really work with someone and with some experience of filmmaking and producing. If someone joins you, that would be really great. But we need producing community because they are the one possibly in future will be moving around, running around, meeting people, make sure that project they're working with that gets sufficient funds and it is viable. Thing is that now we don't have a producer because we do not have a kind of as we do not have local money, it is not sustainable. If it is not sustainable, it is difficult also for a producer to be engaged with the film without really expecting anything, in the sense that for sustenance, for even the operating cost is not there. That is the one. So major problem is our producers also coming as a kind of a army of art, is dedicated, is with a conviction driven by ideals, he is also, she is becoming also producer. It will not work at all. At least this producer has to really get into the basics. And mm, he or she would be empowered enough with the resources to really help you and take the project into for a greater industry platforms.
Thank you, Shantita, so much. Would you like to take a 5-minute break or something? If
Yeah,
we...
I think it would make a cup of tea for 5 minutes.
Sure, sure, sure. So it's 12:08 right now, so we can come back by 12:15 or so, maybe 12:15.
Yeah, 12:15. Okay. Thank you.
So I'm going to now invite anybody who has any questions to raise your hands and pose them to Shantita. Yeah, go for it, Agrima.
Oh, Grima.
Hello, hi Shamila.
Hi.
My first question is a little personal one to you, which is what is your relationship with SRFTI? I've always heard that you frequent the space, you started coming from within it, but I don't really entirely know about it. And this question is also coming from I was reading this book by Lalita Gopalan, Cinema, Dark and Slow in Digital Ages. So that book also charts the history of marginal Indian cinema since the 60s and all. But since both of our major film schools, the central government film schools, FTII and SRFTI, spend 5 out of 6 semesters doing fiction films, there's a little less concentration on documentary in the film schools and in the book that charts the history of marginal cinema in the country. So I just wanted the thing that I was missing out in the book, I wanted from you. What's your relationship with SRFTI? And
mm, I just want to make it brief. Yes, this is the same questions that I also always had in me, and it really bothered me a lot. Honestly speaking, that both the film school, the perception of cinema, both in the kind of policy level and the public level, that's a fiction, the kind of the way industry grew, it's everywhere in the world actually. So documentary never it was actually considered as a kind of a form of storytelling, and it's really started post 50s, particularly in Europe, with the cinema verite and in North America, direct cinema, all those kind of movements, camera stilo, and the evolution in technology. And so it's just 50 onwards, documentary started its own journey. So in a way, understanding of cinema beyond fiction was not existing. And both the film school, particularly FTI, was totally focused on. Being an FTI student, we had 1 month of blah, 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 including a project, uh, which is unfortunate, but at the same time, you cannot blame the policymakers that time, when we were studying, 80s, late 80s. Because there is no perception and understanding at any level available as far as the documentary was concerned. Although that 16 onwards, that Indian documentary cinema start evolving from Sukhdev onwards, and before that film division era, SNS Sastri, Mr. Pati, there's Sukhdev, and later on Mani Kaul and Kumar Shini also joined the band known as a documentary filmmaker. Unfortunately, when you see that a format, these are actually unlike universities, these are professional film school in the sense that the mandate of the pedagogy was basically like that, is focused around professional training, right? So basically, film school are absolutely hands-on, and to learn the craft, and of course at the same time is theoretical premise, history of cinema, and eventually at the end of the day, you become a kind of a craft person, You have specialization in editing, cinematography, direction, sound, so on, script writing. So in specific area, you try to develop your skill, okay? And of course, that time nobody could think of the documentary will be a kind of a viable options where a state is funding to train filmmakers. There has to be a kind of certain degree of employability. If not employability, it's an unorganized industry, and this in a sense that somehow your skill is should be good enough, which could be contributing towards the growth of industry, and it is sustainable for you. In this model, of course, the cinema learning that happened from both the film schools is absolutely, um, you cannot compare with any other institution. It's really great, that it's both the film school actually changed Indian filmmaking, and also the kind of cinematography we get today, kind of editing, all those specializations. The level of skill that film school created, through its students, this is, you cannot really measure it. The impact and the kind of contribution is so profound in the industry. But later on, when we start sensing that documentary is also a kind of storytelling medium, and it is even much stronger and much bigger medium. That sense came little much later. But in a way, as you know, that when you create a kind of system, pedagogy, it has its own kind of a sort of a, it gets confined to its own basic mandate. So breaking away from the film school, as you have said that, the marginal cinema, even FTI was responsible for Indian New Wave. You look at Adoor Gopalakrishnan, Nagavaran, and all sorts of filmmakers, Mani Kaul, Kumar Shani. So, particularly in South, what happened, Girish Kasarabali was not FTI guy, but even then that the cinematographer, editor, he worked with him. So, in a way, uh, overall Indian mainstream cinema is getting a new phase. That is because of the film school. And later on, of course, SLFI also contributed in a big way. But throughout this kind of a journey of film school, they couldn't really get out of the kind of the archaic model that they are the pedestal they fixed themselves into. And it's true that I have also tried in the SRFTI, but I personally can think that the SRFTI students, particularly in editing department, I was a professor of editing. In a semester, they used to see not less than 40 documentary films. And we didn't have a kind of a, see, in a film school, pedagogy is divided in like that, the training program, including practical and theory. First half, it goes into theory discussions, that to the limited period, 5 days in a week. So basically, you have 15 hours of taught component um, in a week. That is theoretical. Then you go into practical. So there, it was very difficult to accumulate, documentary, because um, another thing was it was devised in a very different way, because like the short film, then a studio based project, then you go outdoor documentary, then earlier there was a dialogue scene, dialogue sequence of 5 minutes. So 2 months of thought component, then you got to go for a project which takes maybe another, although officially 1 month, it goes beyond 2 months. Just a minute, someone is coming, sorry. So, so it has been going on, and it was difficult. Uh, and students' approach was also little responsible for this. Why? Because everybody is preparing themselves for the market to go to the industry. Now, would you really spend for a documentary for spending another 3 months or a full semester? Or we'll be getting into the kind of camera practical, which uses crane or Jimmy Jib. So you are driven by that because you really know something that you can really later on, that skill you can invest in the market for yourself also. So all this, the role of the emerging cinema automatically became marginalized because we didn't want it. So there is a constant pressure film school had to deal with, that up to date technology, and up-to-date training program. Then suddenly that new generation of lights are coming into industry. Then students said, okay, we need to have an exercise using all the kind of exotic lights, So we need another 3 weeks workshop. So our film school is a little flexible in terms of it is not pedagogically very restricted. Uh, it is constantly evolving. New technology is coming. Let's adapt it. And they are very kind towards always students, because always try to empower students with new technologies. So with this in mind, always it was something that is uniquely happening in the market. Film school was always trying to uh, bring that new expertise into the campus, and by doing so, that uh, so-called marginal cinema and very personal cinema, and especially documentary, that was missing out. Now, 80s onwards, when we tried, 90s, we tried, but it was seen that there is another void, who will be teaching documentary? Because as a student in the film school, you've never gone through it. As a practicing filmmaker, your also journey was not quite diverse. And at the same time, documentary as a pedagogy. Have you ever seen a book which talks about documentary editing? No. Have you ever seen a book that exclusively talks about documentary cinematography? No. So there is no kind of a discipline, a pedagogical discourses, and uh, the forward-looking kind of exchange in ideas and academic inquiries were not available. So getting resource persons or teachers to systematically get into a process was missing. So these are all the factors, and being a teacher also you avoid giving input in documentary because it is something so alien. Because document fiction has a kind of a protocol. You get into a film school that how to take a shot, what would be the 3-point lighting, what is the dramaturgy, what is the continuity principle. All the principles are available and written. There is a kind of a academic framework which is having a discourse and discussion on this. So it's a kind of defined input. Now, if you talk about documentary film structure, okay, how to shoot a documentary scenario, situation, scene, it's not available even till today. So based on what a kind of a pedagogic model will be evolved. That was the kind of main issues, and till SRFT I tried to make it a kind of 6 months course, a documentary, one full semester, but it is still 2 months only. Now, yes, I was also responsible when I was in SRFT. Being a dean for 6 years, also I tried, but as I said, that kind of a whole idea of giving adequate input to students. Another thing that film school that contaminated, which is definitely mm, deformed the kind of a very ideal kind of pedagogy model or academic process, because I was always talking about, okay, red camera has come. I do not have input on red camera. Suddenly everything is done. Red is coming. Okay. And then suddenly the raw you have to shoot. Now nobody knows what raw is. So an expert is coming for 2 months and additional classes and raw. So it constantly really making an endeavor to empower their students with the updated technology and application that is happening in the industry. And in such a scenario where there is no money, there is no fund, there is no television screening, where documentary as a kind of format is not existing. So film school didn't have the guts, sensibility, and vision to really support documentary into kind of a pedagogic model. Till today it is missing. But at individual level, I have shown almost 40. My fiction students, most of the editing students are documentary filmmakers by default, because they have seen so many documentaries because my personal interest. And there is a 3 days theoretical class, but we watch 7 days. In the morning session, we watched films. So these are the many teachers have done it at the individual level, but it was missing. I'm giving with the absolutely, because I was part of the academic system. So without being cynical towards it, but I'm giving it the kind of a real genuine issues, that film school tried but fumbled and couldn't really come up with a documentary. Unless you have a full-length documentary course, it is not possible. Within the fiction structure, trying to insert a documentary course is not a possibility. It has to be 2 years or 3 years full-term course. That's what I tried in Manipur Film and Television Institute, But eventually, that's a different story that film school didn't actually take off with the course because we couldn't recruit faculty members. So, Northeast is a little unique, so outside and inside it didn't happen. But it is unfortunate. But I think Jamia, I don't know, but Jamia personally have larger input, in terms of it's maybe Apuna Jamia, there's a much better in terms of documentary input.
So in Jamia, there is more of a focus on the documentary. But like you said, a lot of students, so in fact, I went there very recently because I was supposed to look at the final projects and so on. And, it's really strange because their sensibility is that of the documentary because that is what they've been taught, but they want to do fiction. So it's this sort of, strange kind of a thing because I think that's where they think whatever the opportunities lie, perhaps. So it's this strange kind of
That is different thing that someone is going through a kind of training of a hardcore documentary, but looking for making fiction film, it's fine, But where you're in a practical film school, where you have specialization, and every specialization have its own kind of thing. And the whole aspirations of going to Bombay or making films, because your cinema is also actually too much kind of it makes too ambitious, the cinema students and everybody, and somehow I don't know what it's a glamour is a bad word, but something that it's not only the passion for art, there's so many other factors are also involved because of such a larger than life art practices that is, it really asks something else, So you get victimized, getting into the system, So documentary has to be a separate course, separate specialization. People who are interested, they come and join. And someone is making documentary films, he would be definitely much better fiction filmmaker, as far as my understanding goes.
There was also that course at SACAC run by Samira.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, that's
Samira is also only running the course. It's also quite, as I say, it's difficult course, because in a sense we need to have a good resource person, not only filmmakers, you need teachers, good resource persons, and the whole mindset for documentary. So the whole system has to be like this.
Thank you.
So I could answer your question in the sense that.
Yeah, but I just wanted to know your personal history with SRFTI also. Like, for how long were you there at SRFTI? You were in the editing department, you said.
I was professor of editing and HOD for I don't know how many years. I think I was 14 years. Okay, and then 6.5 years as a dean, and that time it is less of teaching, more of kind of admin work. And SRFT, I tried really. Also, my knowledge was limited as far as documentary was concerned. It was because I'm so experienced. So experience ultimately gives you wisdom and understanding and knowledge. But tried, to sensitize students with documentary, and there is quite a lot of students, got quite inspired also. We had a nice time with the documentary sessions with students.
Right. Keshav, you have a question?
Yes. I want to ask that if you could share some principles or some things that we could remind us through this process of making a documentary, and which helps us to bring back us on the line of, like, to be in the process again. Some things that we can remind us of on this process of making a documentary.
Mm. Uh, yeah, this is something um, which I can say a little bit, about my personal take, on documentary. Um, all these things that we are discussing, the film school, documentaries, very isolated positioning, mm, as um, Agrima was talking about, is sort of merging cinema. Mm, um, to me, that very personal audiovisual storytelling, as I said, that I find that it is a very, very personal medium. Fiction is also equally. Here in documentary, challenge is something very special. Now, in a fiction scenario, or even as a writer, the poetry is the best form of fiction, because everything that you can imagine, you can bring in, blend into it. But what we call fiction, it is more of a kind of a real life experience that we try to make a real life experience credible, as close as reality. That's an attempt that we make. That's why we have to go for reconstruction. Now, poetry gives us the kind of absolute freedom. Even music doesn't give me that, because music is very, 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 very kind of a defined body, through which you have to play a lot many things. It is my understanding, and people can really answer, which I really, many, many times I question myself. I believe that the liberty of writing story or writing script, liberty of poetry or something absolutely special. But when you go for share your experience, real life experience, how do you do it? Because uh, real life, you and your experience is very, very intensive. Because me, my world, my interpersonal relationship with my family members, my friends, my day-to-day experience, it is actually me and myself. And it is very much inside me, into my thought process, into my system. How to make all this thing tangible. In a, when you go for reconstruction, so you have a scheme, you have all those ideas, what you have experienced, you try to reconstruct it. But that's how the storytelling is only possible. Now, storytelling is a kind of a, you are getting into a defined structure. You are getting into a formal expression. When you get into a formal expression, so you have to have a discipline. Okay. Without discipline, you cannot get into a formal expressions, a formal anything that is expressed through form, your formal treatment. You need to somehow be precise with discipline. Otherwise, it's not possible. And there is certain protocols. You do this, you cannot go beyond it. When you shoot a documentary, you do not have anything, in the sense that you cannot reconstruct. It's a something is happening in real life. More than real life, it's happening in real time. So, getting into the real time, and putting them together, all those spaces of real time, into a kind of a cohesive, as a structured expression is extremely, extremely difficult. So all your thought process, you do not have time to put into a kind of a, through a definite symbol, or metaphor, or definite element, or definite actions. For example, we was shooting a film on me as a kind of a humbug teacher, retired teachers, who spend a lot of time sort of documentary filmmaking, the young filmmakers. So making a film on me. Now what? How we'll make it? We'll take some my interview. We'll ask me sir these questions. So what we do normally in documentary, we don't actually try to make our experiences tangible. We try to listen to from our characters, or we ask our characters or situation to really go into some functional actions so that we can record. So most of the cases that our positioning is a kind of an outsider, a recorder. That's a very fundamental challenge the documentary is going through. Then how can you make a story? Then? How can you tell a story? How can you make a film? This should be your the primary questions. Um, but yet, the stories are coming from only real life. It's a lived experience. That is translated into reconstructed form of fiction. So, in your case, so you have to look for something, which appears to be experiential. So so give the audience the feel that audience is experiencing. Audience is not being told, or someone is not just talking in front of camera. So that way, I will suggest that something that if you need to really keep in your mind, whether it is a character, if it's a not even character, whatever, the subject and issues that you want to talk about, the story that you want to tell, you have to somehow find a kind of a, you need to get into a kind of a formal structure from the very beginning. In a sense that at least you should think, that how you will be telling the story and what would be the kind of beginning to end of the story. Very simply, what would be at least 5 or 10 important moments, scenes, that will give the essence of the kind of story and deeper understanding of the time and space that you are dealing with. So my advice will be even in the classroom scenario that I will suggest that anything that you write 50 pages about it. Keep writing, 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 writing. So that is your reflection is coming on paper and you go through any subject. You go through and question yourself, have a conversation with yourself, you and yourself, and start thinking, right. When you go, so today you write something and please have 5 lines about a certain moment. So someone yesterday night I got a WhatsApp message. It says about mm, Kolkata night, a slum area, how we will shoot it. So we had been discussing for at least not less than 2 months, 4 or 5 times we have discussed about it. Yesterday I found that it was so great. She texted me, which talks about a very beautiful literary descriptions of the night in the slum, what women are doing, what women are doing, what children are doing, very small, small snippet. After going to the text, I found immediately I got the sense of the space, what it is. I immediately get into the mood of the space. And I could understand that women are playing Ludo, after dinner, under the street light, and they are smoking bidi, something like that. all those imageries are coming alive in front of me. And I'm very sure when he's writing and sending it to me, he has been also going through it. So you look at your space and character in entirety. So your character, most of the cases, documentary, we always frame the character and follow him or go to something, an event. But we don't look at the kind of a space that with so kind of intimately. So what I say that look at things in entirety. Keshav doesn't exist without the overhead, without the batik printed blue t-shirt, without the blurred background, and without a kind of a split of light, highlight, almost burning your left cheek and your forehead, something like that. So when you look at things, you look at your object, your characters, even your space. Suppose in a park in the evening you are sitting. So when you look at it entirety. So feel the time of it, time the way it is flowing through. This is important. That's what I'm saying. That initially I said that it is actually in a documentary what we put together and eventually tell a story. Our essential unit is the fragmented pieces of time. It's not action that way. If you try to capture the actions, then you are gone. So when you say the fragmented pieces of time, that means you look at the space in entirety with the relation of the object and subject and their correlations, how it is being coordinated. Now I was talking about the Islam story, that one same area is written as just some text. I can see when the women, it was the way he has written, I can see the women are smoking and playing card and Ludo under the street light. I can see how the backlight is falling on the moving smoke, smoke is going out, and creating a kind of atmosphere. So it's an atmosphere, its entirety, and your characters and you make an integral part of it, but in lesser component. So you look at the entirety. And our advantage as a documentary filmmaker, we essentially capture a kind of a moving time, passing time on that given space. So you create a kind of a time which is not physical that you have captured it. You create a kind of a piece of time which is going beyond the kind of a captured time, which we call thematic time. So in that case, and this is one, and second thing, spend enough time, and you get exhausted, but don't leave this space. Keep, I will not say recording it, I'll say keep having your conversation alive with the light post, with those ladies, with the Ludo, with the board, with the yellow and green and red, and that cube, and every women they're playing, they have faces, they have attire, It's a, I'm saying that although it's a kind of a mise en scène is a term that we use in fiction and theater, but it's the documentary where the environment and mise en scène that tells the story because you define the correlation, the dynamics between the subject, objects, and character. So their interrelationship and interdynamics that we talk about. And believe me, if you keep recording that time, essentially you will get everything. Where there actually the small grain of your stories, because there is no event is happening in a documentary. You are just following a character, you're following a time. But there would be kind of a intangible grains that is there around, in the frame, that will make the kind of a, essentially that will give the kind of a body and texture of the time and feel of the time. I don't know whether I have told in a very abstraction, but It's what I really feel about. And this is primary, fundamental. If I say there is a pond and there is a kind of a tree and there's a ladder, in the tree, inclined like this in the trunk, I say that this is my story space. I will shoot it. And you have to understand the correlations. This water body, there's a tree, there's a ladder. There might be a kind of a sparrow is sleeping also, you don't know it. The branch of a tree, whatever. Or the insect is actually going up one of the branches. So these are the things, So observation is, I will not say they go into details, I will say that get into entirety. But although you are getting into it, you are cutting out a fragment, space, which time is flowing in eternally to it. That's how I will get. And in a documentary, it's mostly that the film that we like, it is totally an experiential. We experience the time, we experience the characters, their interrelationship, dynamics, and in a given situations, how they possibly negotiate whatever challenges are coming. So in a documentary, the dramatics and dramaturgy, you cannot really put your character into certain things which is dramatic. Dramatic documentary is also extremely dramatic and it's extremely engaging. If you have seen all that breeds, when you push the camera and the way the kites are looking at the camera is held and it's being just moved like this, and there's so many kites are there in the cage. It certainly tells something very special. And that level of depth of field of your looking at things, that is required. And when you see it always, you look at something in a very unique way. So your way of seeing is the kind of the essential strength of documentary.
Definitely. Just a follow-up question. When you say you see the things in entirety, is it okay then to question yourself at each and every point when you are doing something in entirety, that if I saw something or I am observing something, experiencing something, why am I experiencing it in this way? Is it something that shapes my reactions as a documentary filmmaker to the things that are happening, to these small seeds that are being presented to me?
I will suggest don't spoil your journey by questioning yourself too much. Don't question. Be innocent. You don't go. Although we say you don't go somewhere. Open up your lens and start defining your positioning. Then you are gone. You have to look at it little innocently, in a sense that, as you have said, your reactions to it, your response to it, spontaneous responses. In a documentary scenario, you do not take a position and shoot. You come back, and you will have that much larger conversation with material at the edit table. There you create a kind of a conversation and discourse. And there you take possible position. There you find your own interpretations. It is not possible for a filmmaker, anybody, or any great person to get into a space or have an immediate encounter, real life encounter, unless you are everything is skimmed before it, forget about it. But your real life encounter, you cannot understand every vibration. So it's not possible. So becoming choosy and taking a position or kind of looking at things with some kind of your kind of a very I see that don't use your own lenses in documentary. For me, that you better be innocent. That's just experience it. Gather your experience and come back. Then possibly that your lenses would be different while you have a conversation. While you have a conversation with later on with your material. And there you actually tell the story, because your conversation will be very, very strange, and what you have observed there and what you were observing after shooting, it will be totally different. You have observed reality. Now you are revisiting the reality that has been recorded. It tells you something totally different. And there you have to find. So there's a dockage masterclass, and you must be knowing the Danish editor Nilotpal Majumdar. So uh, Neil says that well, I don't go even to shoot. I'm an editor, but and that's why I'm a free person. That's why I'm liberated. I look at my screen and I experience absolutely something stranger than the knowledge I had about the reality that is presented or what the director actually spoke about. So for me, it is absolutely strange. Then I find my understanding. Oh, it is this. Then I put shots and not coordinated, unrelated, fragmented and segmented material I put together and see that in the first day what I understood, the reality that I encountered, it speaks totally something different. And through this process I go and maybe after a long time, yes, that's something that possibly I wanted to see. And I see something that possibly I'm saturated. I cannot see beyond. That's how it works. So I'll suggest that don't question yourself. Don't take a kind of a take moral positioning, ideological positioning, because we are nobody to that. Once we do this, then as an artist, we lose our kind of a sanctity.
I think that's a very profound point that Chantida just made. We lose our artistic sanctity. That's I think a very, very interesting idea and thought and something that I'm wondering right now, when I go film, what am I really doing? Am I putting myself in? Am I putting my rational mind in, or am I just watching, and saying, okay, let's watch this
Well,
with
you are the lucky one having that the purity and experience something, which possibly you have experienced earlier, but in a different time you're experiencing it. But when you start thinking about this, start reconstructing yourself. You are imposing a protocol over you, and that might really blur your unique visions of particular moment. That is possible.
Any other questions? I think this was Agrima. Yeah.
So were you about to end?
No, I was just reflecting and saying that this was almost like a master class, wasn't it? Looking at
So
films.
you can ask any questions, and if you are not tired, I'm okay with that. Then Aparna will be also happy. Anna will say, "Oh, that was a fantastic session."
Yeah, I'm already happy because I started reflecting as well, and I'm like, okay, what do I really do when I go with my camera? Yeah, Agrima.
You prepare. I just bring my cup. Well, the tea was exported to me. Any question?
Yeah, Agrima has.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
like what you were saying about, using really local metaphors, where you took an example of somebody from a remote place in Nagpur, let's say, that's important to bring the most local metaphors Also, it is equally important then to find a universal popular discourse and mix these two to mount your film. Given this, I want to ask if, yours was a very specific example where you said your film with your father is not a potent film in itself because there are other mediums that justify it better. But let's say there were personal films that were suited to the film medium itself. Do you think Indian personal films find equal foreign funding as Indian political films, or Indian films that have more like public content as such, more political in nature, or deal with more popular discourses than interpersonal relationships? I'm asking if Indian films get money for personal films.
Yeah, of course, one way that if you see the popular discourse, that is always available, not only for through documentary cinema, it's in your from scroll to NDTV, all this kind of all possible medium, this is being it's available, it's being talked about. Um, Political films getting funded sometimes it's a reality because possibly the same discourse is looked into from a different perspective with a much greater depth of film and bringing out something in new dimensions, getting really a kind of a deconstructing the kind of the structure which is understood, or the kind of discourse is available. So we are getting into a kind of a new paradigm of looking into things from a fresh point of view. Of course, those are the kind of popular discourse that you were talking about, but it's not true normally because the popular discourse, particularly in grant making, popular discourse is possible when as far as the investment is concerned. So I'll be investing on that particular project. I know a project possibly that talks about what? Okay, uniform civil code, in our given context. Whether people like it, whether I really get trashed by the administration, whatever, and whether there's a troll army will be just take my piece away, whatever happens, I know this is something that which will generate a kind of a discourse. It will generate a further kind of a, it could be controversy and it could be something that people will participate, common people. So it is, I'm looking at it from a point of view on investment. Now, most of the cases, as far as the documentary is concerned, the investment pattern is very different. It's long term. As I said that we are actually, it's an art practices, but at the same time, it's a kind of a knowledge industry. So we basically, um, in an industry where we are acquiring and regenerating knowledge. Now, most of the cases documentaries will find it is not the popular discourse, it's other way around, more kind of personal films, that gets much more attentions because most of the films, I will suggest you look at not at the industry, but of course industry, but you look at grants, for young people like this one, first two films, you don't really look at the international co-productions. I'll come to later on, this is last my sermon, I'll give it later. But thing is that, mm, as I said, that Nagpur story, this is something that why we want to listen to the story. Very simple, because your experience, your mind, your thought process. Suppose you ask me something at my age, I have rationalized so many things. It is not possible for me to be a revolutionary anymore. because I also questions the kind of outcome of revolution. I also questions that how parochial it is, and how limited in terms of its overall perspective. So I did candlelight uh, walking for so many years, but now I will not do it. I also see that I find that the alternative ideas also has a voice and resonance. Should not I really lend my ears and look at it and start thinking about it? So, um, but from you with your unique experience, with this something specific from suburb of Nagpur or behind that of village, I want to know this space. I want to know this kind of this so-called the kind of the vibrations, the resonances of this place. And it would be something horrific, it could be something very positive, it could be overwhelming, whatever. An individual is looking at her own time, her own space. So you are telling a story. This is what we do actually in the name of storytelling. Now, otherwise, why people will listen to your story? Because you are not part of us. You are not part of me. You are not part of the kind of common experience that we share. So, but you are coming from somewhere else. As I said that, if you see that, if you measure the appetite, of the human being, the maximum appetite that human being possess, and they have, for knowledge. It could be coming as information. It could be coming as a fragmented reflection of certain things. It will be coming an overall understanding of certain things. But we need always information knowledge. That is something that our energy and passion we divert most in our life. Even if you are a job, you are not reading book, fine. You are not listening to music, is fine. But when you go travel from Greater Kailash to Janpath, by metro, you are questioning yourself. You are thinking. Your mind is constantly working. You are looking at people. Suddenly, you start wondering, oh, Outskirts is such a beautiful metro. It's a line, blue line, red line. What are the technology? How much of invest? You constantly start knowing, understanding, all those possible endeavors. That's why storytellers are required, and that's why we are always listening to the story. Why people say that my take is why mobile is so popular, because it's not because that Facebook and it. No, mobile is anything that media that allows people to have a greater conversations. That you have the sea of information in your fingertips. That's why anybody without any educations or in a PhD scholar is going traveling by train. You will see that I have seen in Delhi Metro recently, 8 people just opposite to my. I was observing how many of them are using mobile. 8 of them are really looking at it. Now, my son says that next generations and human being will not be straight. They'll be like this because of the this era of experience of always sitting like this. So, cutting short to your question that you asked, of course, there's a possibility and there's a greater possibility. That's the story we want. We don't want to have a kind of a film made on uniform civil code. We don't really want a film that's made on how what is happening in Manipur, because maybe one or two film that really takes the courses to the next level with a different depth of film. It's fine. Otherwise, stories are day-to-day experience. Your experience is unique. You are unique persons. You don't have to have any knowledge, but you need a kind of that skill of artistry to express yourself. Each and every individual expressions we cannot get, but we get it through storytelling in different forms of storytelling. So of course it is there. And I will just suggest you to start with look, don't get into the kind of complexity of co-productions. Okay. International co-production. Forget it. Even to and go to pitching forum. Pitching forum is not for getting money. Pitching forum is discovering you as a filmmaker, where do you stand? Teaching forum is a place where you have a peer dialogue and discussions, and fellow filmmakers and artists coming from different parts of the world, kind of experience they have, social and emotional, and the kind of technique and tools. What is their creative toolbox? Toolkit. Toolkit is a bad word. So creative toolkit, that is something that you find out. And what you do, you just still few kits, tools, and put your own toolkits in it. And look for money which is grant, philanthropic grant, and foundation grant, Grant will be good enough, to make your film in India. Go with this, be a filmmaker first, and then talk about funding and all, Funding is something that it's so simple. You send 3 minutes footage and send 2 pages, You don't know anybody in this world, but Sundance is giving you money by reading this and going through it. So it's the most transparent model. You don't have to be a Dada. You don't have to be Nilotpal or Sharmila to really guide you. You just send it. Of course. So I said it's the only way, and filmmaking is not that earlier that we used to listen to senior filmmakers. Even in Q&A, people, direct filmmakers used to say, "Oh, it's my baby, I thought like this, It doesn't work. Good thing is that when you are creating a discourse for public, for people to participate, when people say good words, you are amused. It's a catharsis for you. When people say something critical, you say, it's my baby, I thought about this. Instead, you get into kind of a community discussion. It's called co-creation today. Get into co-sharing and co-creations. And it's a complex medium. So start empowering yourself. With as much as possible, you reflect up and get into touch up and pick up. This maybe the coming next 2 films, you do like this. Make at least one film that give you confidence that you are a storyteller. Forget about what world is telling you. Most difficult thing is you never recognize yourself as a storyteller. I myself do not recognize myself as a storyteller because I know what are the lapses, what I really failed, what I couldn't achieve, and what I wanted to talk about. So I will say that you young filmmakers have that practice, that develop yourself, trust yourself. You are an artist, you are a storyteller. It's a difficult journey, but it's an essential journey that you make. Once you have that confidence, then you start telling story whatever you feel like. So your craft, your art, and your body of work speak about it. लेक्चर हो गया थोड़ा सा.
Thank you, Shantida. Priya, you had your hand raised, but then you, I guess was your question answered? I guess it was. Okay, so Divya is saying thanks for these great words, and I think that is probably the overwhelming emotion for everyone who's been part of this session today. We're at 1:15, and with great regret, I'm having to say that Shantida, we will now call the session to a close. Thank you so much once again for coming and sharing. Okay, Priya saying it was answered. Okay, great. So for coming and sharing your experiences, your thoughts on documentaries, how you look at documentaries. And I think, I can certainly speak for myself, it was really a pleasure listening to you, because, we're all constantly working on our films, but a lot of times it's really good. It was like a grounding exercise in a way, bringing us back to why we make films at all. Because otherwise you get so caught up in, will I get funding? Okay, who's going to say yes? Is it ticking those boxes? And, all of that. So I think this is
especially because all the last sessions we were having, we've been trained to sell our film also, pitch our film, make the right text for our film. We're necessary filmmakers, but I don't consider myself as a great text writer, but I have confidence that I can make my film. So we're being trained to do a lot of things with filmmaking. So this was really nice that we came back to what the film is and what the film should be and how the film should be made.
I think so too.
Thank you, Aparna. And it's an also opportunity for me. I never could really attend, and I was always busy with so many things. But it's always great to have an interactions with younger filmmakers because I value you quite a lot, because even my 20 years of endeavor in documentary, consistently without it was almost quite a seamless, Um, just I'll say something, that's to really wrap up the sessions. You are absolutely precious as far as the kind of a whole human endeavor goes, unless you tell story from your own space, unless really we don't find the native expressions and interpretations, the world will be different. So nurture yourself. You don't have to be a great storyteller. Don't imagine that you're a great artist. You don't have to be, tell certain stories, At least all of you tell one or two stories of your life. That is good enough. And the kind of this contribution would be immense. Maybe down the line, after a century, there will be no text available. It's all images. And we'll be possibly creating your life in your time. You are putting your experience into this incredible archive for future. So your space and your own world, that's what we want to know about. And not only we want to know about, we want to learn from. Otherwise, that every process of learning in the kind of it's also an economy, and it has its own template. Only possibly the storytelling doesn't have a template. It is not homogeneous. Each and every element, every fragment of the story is really, really unique. With this, I give you kind of a profound confidence to be one of the kind of a proactive element into the what the old world is thinking, and looking at. It is really, I believe, and I'm not just giving you a lecture. It's important that so don't never try to universalize it. Yes, to be sustainable, to make it sustainable, to really depend on this. Yeah, you would be doing in between something, just sustenance. It's not a crime, But if you really want to be a storyteller, and it's an industry, it's one of the most vibrant industry. Audiovisual industry actually, in terms of its kind of revenue that generates, audiovisual industry is the highest now, over, overtaking the music industry and other industry, creative industry. So that way, it is one of the most vibrant professions also. Yes, meanwhile, it's a very complex and it's very difficult, And out of 10 people, only 1 or 2 people actually becoming a storyteller. So it's a process where you really have to go through, because it's a formal expression, it's a form, it's a body of work, it is a discipline and protocol. So it's quite how your mind and your emotion can be translated into this kind of a system. That's a huge exercise and task that you have to go through. So thank you again.
Before we leave, I just want to read out some of the comments that people have written. So Divya says, thanks for these great words. Priya says, thank you for this great session. Shruti is saying, thank you for your insights. It has pushed for a lot of reflection. Thank you. Kalol says, thank you so much, sir. It was a great interaction. And Purnima also says, thank you, sir. It was a great session.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. And
that note, happy Sunday, everyone, and have a good week ahead. And thank you once again, Shantita.
I didn't sense speaks too much about dockage, that it's just given an introduction is good, As I say that market and all, it's step 3, this where you come.
Indeed.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for staying on, and thank you, Shantida.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care.